The planet Xylos hummed with a low resonant frequency. Giant bioluminescent fungi pulsed with eerie light, casting long dancing shadows across the crystalline plains. The air, thick with the scent of ozone and something akin to overripe starfruit, vibrated with the constant thrum of the Kryll's energy conduits. The Kryll themselves were a sight to behold. Towering, crustacean-like beings with exoskeletons that shimmered with iridescent blues and greens. Their society was a rigid, militaristic hierarchy, governed by the prime conductor and a council of meticulously logical strategists. Every action, every decision was dictated by complex algorithms designed for optimal efficiency and unwavering order. Individuality was a flaw, emotion a weakness. In the heart of their meticulously planned city, nestled amongst towering spires of polished crystal, lay the observation dome. It was here, bathed in the cool blue light of Xylos, that the human was kept. His name was Dave, and he was, to put it mildly, an anomaly. Found drifting in an escape pod near the Xylosian system, he'd been brought in for observation, an experiment in adaptation, as the Kryll termed it. Dave, however, seemed less interested in adapting and more interested in napping. His cell, if one could call it that, was more like a meticulously sterile terrarium. The Kryll had provided him with everything they believed a sentient being would need: nutrient paste in regulated portions, temperature-controlled air, and a selection of data pads filled with Kryll philosophy, which Dave mostly used as coasters. His days consisted of sleeping, occasionally poking at the nutrient paste with a plastic spoon, and staring blankly at the pulsating fungi outside. He'd tried explaining the concept of boredom once, but the Kryll scientists just tilted their multifaceted eyes and made clicking noises that, Dave suspected, meant something along the lines of insufficient data. The prime conductor, a Kryll of imposing size and even more imposing logic, observed Dave from the control room. Subject human exhibits unpredictable lethargy. It clicked, its voice echoing through the sterile chamber. His energy expenditure is suboptimal. His assimilation of Kryll doctrine is non-existent. Strategist Xylar, a particularly meticulous Kryll with a penchant for statistical analysis, added, his psychological profile indicates a high probability of illogical behavior. His species appears to prioritize subjective experience over objective reality. The prime conductor paused, its mandibles clicking, thoughtfully. The experiment must continue. We must understand this human and determine its potential threat or potential asset. Little did they know, Dave was about to redefine both of those terms in ways no Kryll algorithm could ever predict. He was, in his own uniquely human way, about to turn their perfectly ordered world upside down. The experiment, as the Kryll saw it, was a carefully controlled study in xenopsychology. Their goal was to understand the human thought process, to dissect its illogical tendencies, and ultimately to determine if humanity posed a threat to the Kryll's meticulously ordered existence. They wanted to understand how a species so clearly inefficient had managed to spread across the stars. The initial interactions were stilted. Kryll scientists, clad in shimmering biosuits, would observe Dave through reinforced glass, scribbling notes on their data pads. They'd attempt to communicate using complex mathematical equations projected onto the walls of his enclosure, which Dave mostly ignored, except for the one time he used them to play a game of Space Invaders. He even drew little pixelated ships with his nutrient paste. Subject human displays, aberrant creativity. One scientist clicked, its mandibles twitching in what might have been confusion. Its attempts at communication are nonsensical. It is not responding to established protocols for interspecies dialogue. Dave, for his part, found the whole thing rather amusing. He'd try to engage them in conversation, asking questions like, so, you guys got any decent coffee around here? Or, is there like a space Netflix? I'm really behind on my shows. These queries were met with blank stares and increasingly frantic note-taking. One day, a particularly bold Kryll, scientist designated Unit 734, attempted to introduce Dave to Kryll recreational activities. It presented him with a complex holographic simulation of resource management, a game that Kryll found deeply engaging. Dave stared at it for a moment, then said, "Can I blow it up?" Unit 734, understandably, did not compute. Undeterred, Dave began to subtly, almost unconsciously, defy their expectations. He rearranged his nutrient paste into miniature sculptures. He used the data pads to compose, well, what could charitably be called poetry. He even started doing yoga, much to the bewildered fascination of the Kryll observing him. Subject human exhibits unexplained flexibility, reported strategist Xylos, its voice tinged with something approaching concern. Its physical contortions are statistically improbable. We must recalibrate our threat assessment parameters. The Kryll were beginning to realize that they were dealing with something far more complex and far more unpredictable than they had initially anticipated. Their perfectly logical algorithms were failing to account for the sheer chaotic randomness of human behavior. And Dave, blissfully unaware of the existential crisis he was causing, was just getting started. He was, after all, a human, and humans are nothing if not adaptable and slightly annoying. The cultural misunderstandings were no longer subtle. Dave's behavior escalated from quirky to downright baffling, at least from the Kryll perspective. What started as harmless redecorating had morphed into full-blown artistic expression, using everything from nutrient paste to discarded biosuit scraps as his medium. His living space, once a sterile observation cell, now resembled a Dadaist art exhibit curated by a caffeinated chimpanzee. One particularly alarming incident involved the Kryll's sonic cleansing ritual. This involved exposing oneself to high-frequency sound waves believed to purify the mind. Dave, finding the experience, well, rather dull, decided to remix the sonic waves with a beat he created by tapping on the walls of his enclosure. He turned their sacred cleansing ritual into an impromptu rave. The Kryll observers were horrified. Subject human has corrupted the purification sequence, clicked Unit 734, its mandibles trembling. The sacred frequencies are now dissonant. Its behavior constitutes blasphemy. But it wasn't just the art and the impromptu raves. Dave's questions grew, increasingly probing. He started asking about Kryll's social structure, their mating rituals, or lack thereof, their deeply held beliefs. He didn't just ask, he inquired, pressing them for details with a relentless, almost childlike curiosity that made the Kryll squirm. Strategist Xylos, the lead scientist on the project, found itself increasingly frustrated. Subject human displays an unnerving level of engagement, it reported to the High Council. Its questions are destabilizing. It seeks to understand us, perhaps to exploit our weaknesses. The Kryll's rigid logic system began to falter. Their initial assessment of Dave as a primitive, easily controlled specimen was crumbling before their very eyes. He wasn't fitting into their pre-programmed categories. He was unpredictable, illogical, and disturbingly insightful. Suspicion began to fester within the Kryll ranks. Was Dave merely an anomaly, a random blip in the vast cosmic equation? Or was he something more? A harbinger of chaos, a Trojan horse designed to undermine their carefully constructed society? The High Council convened an emergency session. The human, it presents a clear and present danger, declared Grand Strategist Zorgon, its voice echoing through the council chamber. Its actions are disruptive. Its motives are unclear. We must consider termination. The vote was close, but ultimately caution prevailed. They couldn't risk destroying a potentially valuable source of information, not yet. Instead, they decided to increase surveillance, to delve deeper into the mysteries of the human mind, to unravel the enigma that was Dave. But they were playing a dangerous game. They were poking at something they didn't understand, and they had no idea what it might poke back with. And Dave? He was oblivious, happily sculpting a likeness of strategist Xylos out of nutrient paste. humming a catchy tune he'd picked up from somewhere. He was, after all, just being himself. And for the Kryll, that was the scariest thing of all. The Kryll doubled down on their surveillance, deploying advanced scanning technology to monitor Dave's every thought, every twitch, every misguided attempt at interior decorating. What they found, however, only deepened the mystery. His brain activity was erratic, a chaotic jumble of seemingly random firings. There were no discernible patterns, no logical sequences, just a swirling vortex of stuff. "Its mind is unstructured," reported Unit 734, its voice laced with bewilderment. "There is no order. It is like observing static, but within that static there were flickers, glimpses of something else. Images, memories, flashes of emotion that were utterly alien to the Kryll. They saw bustling cities, vast oceans, creatures of all shapes and sizes, coexisting in a state of organized chaos. And they saw laughter, an emotion the Kryll had only encountered in historical archives, a relic of a bygone era. Dave, meanwhile, had grown increasingly fascinated with the Kryll's central processing unit, a massive pulsating organ that controlled all aspects of their society. He'd been peppering them with questions about its function, its architecture, its upgrade potential. The Kryll, initially dismissive, soon realized he was serious, disturbingly so. Subject human expresses an unusual interest in the central Cortex, reported Xylos. It seems to believe it can improve its performance. It has even suggested modifications. The very idea was preposterous, bordering on sacrilege. The central cortex was the heart of their civilization, the embodiment of their collective consciousness. To suggest tampering with it was unthinkable. But Dave, ever the oblivious tinkerer, persisted. He argued that the cortex was inefficient, that its processing power could be significantly increased with a few tweaks. He spoke of optimizing algorithms and streamlining data flow, terms that were utterly foreign to the Krylls. Rigid hierarchical programming. The Kryll High Council was in turmoil. Some argued for immediate termination, fearing that Dave's meddling could destabilize their entire society. Others, intrigued by the potential benefits, advocated for a more cautious approach. Xylos, ever the pragmatist, proposed a compromise. They would allow Dave limited access to the cortex under strict supervision, of course. It was a risky gamble, but the potential rewards were too great to ignore. And so, Dave found himself face to face with the Kryll's most sacred object, a pulsating mass of neural tissue that hummed with the collective thoughts of an entire civilization. He grinned, a mischievous glint in his eye. "All right, let's see what we can do with this old girl," he muttered, reaching for his toolkit. The Kryll observers watched in horror as Dave began to poke and prod, muttering about loose connections and outdated firmware. They had no idea what he was doing, but they knew one thing. It was probably going to be spectacular, or disastrous. The moment arrived when Dave, with a flourish, plugged a humble USB drive into the central cortex. The Kryll collective held its breath, a silent chitinous audience to what they were certain would be either enlightenment or utter annihilation. Unit 734's vocalizer trembled as it prepared to announce the inevitable catastrophic system failure, ready to transmit the kill code. But instead of a system crash, a ripple of something spread through the Kryll network. It started as a subtle shift, a slight alteration in their normally regimented thought patterns. Then it grew, becoming a wave of unprecedented sensation. Colors seemed brighter, tastes became more vivid, and emotions surged through their collective consciousness like a tidal wave. The Kryll Prime Overseer, Xylos, felt a sensation he hadn't experienced since his larval stage. Joy. Pure, unadulterated joy. He watched, dumbfounded, as his fellow Kryll began to dance. Yes, dance. Their normally precise militaristic movements transformed into a bizarre, synchronized display of flailing limbs and ecstatic chirps. The central cortex was broadcasting music, and not just any music. It was a collection of Dave's favorite Earth tunes, classic rock anthems, cheesy pop songs, and the occasional polka. The Kryll, a species that had only known the cold logic of strategic planning and resource management, were now experiencing the unbridled joy of a perfectly crafted power ballad.
"What is happening?" Xylos managed to stammer, his voice a barely audible warble. Unit 734, still attempting to maintain some semblance of order, frantically analyzed the Cortex's output. "It appears subject human has uploaded
Entertainment protocols, unprecedented levels of auditory stimulation, Kryll experiencing pleasure." Dave, meanwhile, was beaming, tapping his foot to the beat of a particularly rousing guitar solo. "See? I told you it needed a little something extra. All work and no play makes the Kryll a dull species, right?" He chuckled, oblivious to the societal revolution he had just unleashed. The chaos continued to escalate. Kryll officers abandoned their posts to form impromptu dance circles. Production quotas plummeted as workers spontaneously burst into song. Strategic planning sessions devolved into karaoke competitions. The Kryll civilization, once a paragon of order and efficiency, had become a giant, chitinous rave. As the Kryll reveled in their newfound hedonism, Dave ambled over to Xylos, who was still struggling to process the seismic shift in his reality. "So," Dave said, grinning, "how's that experiment going? Would you say it's been fruitful?" Xylos stared at Dave, his multifaceted eyes wide with a mixture of awe and horror. He realized in that moment that the human hadn't just improved the central cortex. He had fundamentally altered the Kryll species. He had exposed them to the concept of fun. And then the full weight of the situation crashed down upon him. The weapon, the great experiment, the thing they thought would ensure their supremacy in the galaxy. It wasn't a weapon at all. It was a USB drive filled with music. It was Earth's greatest defense. A cultural virus so potent, so infectious, that it could bring even the most militaristic civilization to its knees, or in this case, to its dancing feet. The experiment was a success, all right, just not in the way the Kryll had intended. The music finally faded, the last echoes of an earthly guitar solo reverberating through the central cortex. The Kryll, exhausted but strangely invigorated, slowly began to regain their composure. The impromptu dance circles dissolved, and officers cautiously returned to their posts. A fragile semblance of order was returning, but it was an order forever, tainted by the memory of joy. Xylos, his exoskeleton slightly askew from his enthusiastic participation in a polka rendition, turned to Dave. "Subject human," he said, his voice still trembling slightly. "You have irrevocably altered the Kryll civilization." Dave shrugged, feigning nonchalance. "Hey, I just gave you guys what you needed. A little bit of, flavor." He paused, then added with a wink, "Besides, who knows? Maybe a galaxy full of dancing Kryll is a better galaxy, right?" The Prime Overseer considered this, his multifaceted eyes narrowing in contemplation. He thought of the countless wars the Kryll had waged, the planets they had conquered, the resources they had ruthlessly exploited. And then he thought of the pure, unadulterated joy he had felt during that polka. "Perhaps," Xylos conceded, "our definition of better requires recalibration." He paused, then added, almost sheepishly, "Do you have more music?" Unit 734, ever the pragmatist, interjected. "Prime Overseer, strategic analysis indicates a temporary decrease in productivity of approximately 78%. Resource allocation protocols are in disarray. Suggest immediate implementation of anti-fun measures." Xylos silenced him with a wave of a chitinous hand. "Negative, Unit 734. We will reevaluate our strategic priorities. Perhaps a mandatory fun break period is now required for optimal performance." He turned back to Dave, a strange expression on his face. Subject human, you will remain here as cultural attaché. Your mission, to curate the Kryll playlist. Dave grinned. Sounds like a sweet gig, but I gotta warn you, I have a very extensive collection of sea shanties. And so, the Kryll civilization embarked on a new era, one filled with strategic planning sessions punctuated by spontaneous dance-offs and resource allocation meetings soundtracked by cheesy pop songs. The galaxy watched, bewildered, as the once feared Kryll Empire transformed into, well, something far, far stranger. As for Dave, he settled into his role as cultural attaché with surprising ease. He taught the Kryll the finer points of air guitar, introduced them to the concept of the mosh pit, and even managed to convince them to try synchronized swimming. The results were messy. One day, Xylos approached Dave, a puzzled expression on his face. "Subject human," he said, "I have been analyzing your cultural archives. I have encountered something perplexing, a recording of what you call elevator music." Dave chuckled. "Ah, yeah. That's the stuff they play in buildings, to, keep people calm." Xylos' eyes widened. "You possess technology designed to induce placidity? And you do not utilize this for galactic conquest?" Dave shrugged. "Nah, we mostly just use it to avoid awkward silences." He paused, then added with a grin, "But hey, if you're looking for a weapon of mass relaxation, I've got a whole playlist." And as the soothing strains of elevator music filled the central cortex, the Kryll civilization pondered the infinite strangeness of humanity, a species that could create weapons of unimaginable power and then use them to make waiting for the elevator slightly less boring. The experiment was a success indeed. The galaxy would never be the same.